ahead, go. Action.
All right, we're doing drills, right? Because we're COVIDed up again. So one kind of consistent theme that I've been working on with these dummies is working on like shoulder pressure and being able to move around the dummy and keep not only like a kinesthetic awareness of where I am and where my dummy is relative to me, but at the same time being able to maintain pressure throughout the transition if possible. All right, so one of the drills is going to be this like guillotine defense drill, or like a post double leg type. We're driving in with our shoulder here. Now, one of the things that can happen, especially if you're like defending guillotines or doing these sort of up and over transitions, right? Sometimes we get all the way into this weird position where we're in this like upside down north-south, right? Where we're just like, this isn't a position that we study, right? So, and this happens a lot, like probably not like a lot, but oftentimes we get into positions where we aren't too familiar with them. They're not really hashed out as far as like what we should do when we get there or when they happen, right? So when this happens, we need to think about like what should we look for when it comes up to novel situations like this, right? So first things first, usually when this happens, right, I want to maintain my connection and my pressure with this person, right? So I'm going to keep my hips up and I'm going to keep my shoulders driving into my person, right? So second, right, now that I have this connection here, my goal will be to turn my hips over so that I can engage my feet with the ground in a useful way, right? Because right now my feet are on the floor and they keep my hips up, but I can't really drive into them very effectively, right? It's hard to make any worthwhile transitions, right? So I'm going to turn my hips over. Now my feet are in charge of, like they're able to grip with the ground here, right? And I can keep this pressure here, right? And then from here, right, instead of putting my knees on the ground, right, I want to be able to maintain shoulder pressure, right? So instead of trying to like establish a normal side control, right, I'll go and I'll keep my shoulder pressure and move into this, what's it called? Reverse Kesa position, right? And I'm maintaining pressure here, still heavy with the shoulder, and I can walk my hips all the way back into this north-south position, right? But the goal throughout that whole transition is going to be how can I keep this shoulder heavy until I'm in my established position where I want to go, right? Another option, if you don't want to go into like this side control or this reverse Kesa, right? We can go here, and I'm still turning my hips, but instead of kind of rotating around here, I'll reach with my elbow first and then pull my hips back into north-south here, right? But what I'm usually looking for is cross-body control. In either case, you'll notice the first one, right? I still brought this elbow over, and this gives me this attachment here, right? And I have my hips elevated, so not only am I able to stay dynamic, but I'm able to stay heavy as well. All right, so if you want, you can start a little bit further away. It's a little bit more chaotic, right? But once you transition up and over, right, immediately try and get your elbows to the floor, chest nice and heavy. If you can, connect your elbows to your knees. Right, from here, we can continue into more shoulder pressure drills. More advanced is going from this north-south into back into the reverse Kesa. Right, so in this case, shoulder heavy. We're going to come up and over, and I'm driving into my bridge here. I'm still heavy with my shoulder. Right, walk my hips back, elbow across, hips back in. All right, do the other side, up and over. My hips stay off the mat. My shoulder is still heavy. I'm pivoting until I can get my cross-body control and move my hips back into the north-south. And so, transition. Right. Another option would be to start with your head on the same side, right? And it's going to be the same idea where our hips stay up, right? Pivoting on the shoulder, staying heavy as we walk. We can go back to the start. We've done that drill before. We covered that. So those are the drills that I've been working on. Do you have anything to add?
I think I want to add a couple things. And I think those drills are awesome, but I know a lot of people, what they're saying, Kevin, is they're like, I don't have a dummy, right? And so I'm just gonna improvise, all right? Now we happen to have, sorry, my head is cut off. We happen to have a lot of different dummies here that you know you can work with, and we have other equipment that's kind of laying around that I think is pretty easy or it can be adapted, right? So, you know, my first idea, right? I was just thinking, you know, what would a substitute for this be? Now this is, I don't know how high off the ground this is, maybe 8 inches off the ground. And it's solid, right? Like there's no real give to this. I mean, there's give, but there's no, like you're not gonna sink into it. So I was wondering, what else can we use, Coach Kevin? Actually, I don't know if this is gonna tip over. It should tip over.
A brick with a rag on it?
You've got
That's a good one.
a sandbag. Now, that is not as high as the dummy, right? But
That'll make it more difficult.
that'll make it a little more difficult, okay? But, and you know, maybe we can add some things to this. I don't know. I'm just gonna come over here to my closet. You can still do it on there. It's gonna make you break a lot more.
Oh, that's weird.
Right? Now look, here's the other thing. Like you can put, I'm just gonna put some geese on it.
Nice.
Right? I don't know if this will even work, right? You know, you come over here, boom. That feels pretty good actually.
It's not bad.
Here. Right? And it's just something you can put your shoulder on. You don't need that much, thin, you know, like,
If you've got a child at home,
yeah, you've got a 10-year-old, you know, you just sit. So this is actually, you know, the lower you get in, the more difficult it is,
Yeah.
right? But that's something that's good in a way. That's a feature, not a flaw.
yeah.
The other thing that this is essentially, this sandbag is just a glorified duffel bag. So if you have a duffel bag at home, or you can get a duffel bag on Amazon, you can take clothes or whatever. If you have sand, you put sand in it. Put the clothes in the duffel bag. As long as it's not a duffel bag that you really care that much about, I wouldn't spend too much on it. And you can just make yourself a little sandbag or whatever filled with this.
A torso.
It's essentially, that's what it is. It's a torso. So you can go and do, now this still isn't as high, right? But you just plant that shoulder here, you come over, that was not great, right? Here,
Nice.
there.
Yeah.
I mean, that,
Yeah.
you don't need that much space, you don't need that much. And this drill is an awesome drill. This is like a lot of drills that we do that, I don't know that they necessarily translate 100%. I mean, this doesn't translate 100% either, but this is like a great drill from the perspective of you're really working on a lot of things that you don't generally get to work on in a drill, right? In terms of you saying kinesthetic sense, working flexibility. You do that 20 times, you're gonna get a sweat on. And you can also do all the other, you know, similar things that you would do on a torso. You know, if you're gonna do knee on belly type of things, you just wanna mix it up. And then if you do have a sandbag, and these sandbags are not much. I mean, if you go to Amazon or Rogue, whatever, I mean, you can always fill it up with what you like. Do some squats or lifts, right? Here, this is like 50 pounds. Get down here, put your shoulder on, come over. Do those little jumps, or bridges, whatever, I don't know what they're called.
Yeah, they're not bridges because you go into them, but it's, yeah, a reverse bridge.
Reverse bridge, whatever it's called.
Yeah.
So don't be, I mean, you just need something that's pretty solid. I wouldn't just put, you know, some, well, maybe if you filled up with enough t-shirts, it would be fine.
Yeah.
But I like the sand because the sand,
It's heavier too.
it's heavier. Would mean to probably get it down, be less flat.
I would also recommend, right, like this is quarantine drilling and
It's like prison drilling.
yeah, you should try and make it as not boring as possible, right? When you're drilling, you don't have to do the same thing over and over. Like as you get comfortable, like try and mix together drills, try and get creative, try and put a little bit of aesthetic beauty into it. Try and make it, push the envelope as far as like what you're able to do and like how good you can make it look and how smooth you can make it. And like, you know, if we don't have time to drill with people, then you gotta find other outlets of creativity and expression and physicality. And this is one of those drills that is kind of like right on the cusp of being difficult and also on the cusp of like, you know, you're limited in what you're able to do, but you're also, there's a lot of options with that limited availability, right? So there's so many different ways that we can pivot on the shoulder and transition between like bridging and going belly down, right? You can transition between shoulders, right? We can go into different sides, but the goal is, you know, like try and move around. It's going to be awkward, especially, you know, on a kind of misshapen object like this. It's going to get weird. You're going to fall down. When you fall down, I see this a lot, especially when people are first starting. They come over, right, and they fall flat. And they're like, oh no, like I failed. Well, it's like, no, this is just another thing that happens that you need to figure out a solution to, right? So when this happens, what do? Well, what do we have? I've got my feet connected to the floor, so I can use those to drive myself back into the person, right? Once I have that, I've got my shoulder connected, so now I'm at the point where I can pivot, right? And if I can pivot, I can turn my hips down again and re-engage and continue with the drill, right? So not everything is going to go perfectly all the time. Don't let that, you know, put you into a state of dismay, right? Just keep working, adjust as things happen, and celebrate like the things that you have and are able to do, and don't get too caught up with what you messed up.
The other thing I'd add is that when you do these, it can be a little intimidating, right? To do the full forward, not a roll, but the forward bridge, right? So the way that I'll do with the kids is you just have a progression, right? Like, so the first thing is just kind of getting comfortable putting your feet up in the air. And so it doesn't have to be, you know, I just throw myself over and crash, and depending on, I would say, if you can do these like outside on grass, if you don't have any mats, you know, do it outside on grass or put something soft down, whether it's a mat. I think most people have like yoga mats, or at least can get them.
Good carpeting is okay.
Good carpeting, but you know, you just have to be, you know, cautious. You don't want to bang things onto like a hardwood floor, especially when you're not getting used to it. You know, coming over and hitting, you know, your back on hardwood floors is not fun. So, you know, even if you're not comfortable doing that, either because, you know, the surface is not ideal, or maybe your kinesthetic awareness is still not at the point where it needs to be in order to be comfortable throwing that over, right? You can still focus or practice on just getting your feet up and your hips up in the air. So if I'm here, right, I'm just gonna walk, first I'll just walk my hips into the air, and then work on, you know, balancing just up here, and then coming back down. Just like you would practice like a headstand or a handstand, right? And then from here, you know, instead of having to go like totally over, you can just turn your hips over and come into this cross-side position. Yeah. So it's a lot harder when you don't have anything. Like, that's going to be a super challenge, I think, for most people. The headstand is not that hard, but if you have a surface that's not padded, doing headstands on like hardwood flooring or carpet is not going to be, you know, you're not going to want to do a lot of those. So the nice thing about this, and what I would really emphasize, is instead of putting you're focusing on your weight on your head, think about your weight on your shoulder. That's the point, is being able to put pressure down on your training partner anyway. So when I do this, you might notice when I was doing it before, I kind of put my hand like flat like on the other side, because I'm kind of doing this. Ideally, like you're holding the legs.
Cups and butt.
Yeah, so what he said. And the reason I'm able to do that, I would not be able to do that on a regular handstand or headstand, or handstand for that matter, because I need these as base, as posts. But when I'm here, right, the majority of my weight is going to be on my shoulder, right? So as I go up, you know, my hands, I can actually kind of take those off the floor a little bit, right? Here, I'll lose a little bit of base. And then come sideways, right? But the point is that I'm maintaining shoulder pressure on the bag or my training partner the whole time. That's what we're ideally, It's one of the things that we're really focusing on. It's not just doing headstands and flips for the fun of it, which they are fun to do, right? But it's even more fun to do it when it's on a real person.
And they're guillotining you.
And they're trying to guillotine you and you're being able to get out of it. So I just wanted to point this out that, look, I have a sandbag. They're not that hard to get. You could go to Home Depot. They're still open. You can get yourself a sandbag. You can fill it up with 50 pounds of sand. Just a simple sandbag that you would use on, on the road or something. It doesn't have to be, from road, whatever. I'm sure I overpaid for sandbag. It could just be a duffel bag filled with some sand. That costs, I don't know how much sand costs, but it's probably super cheap as dirt.
It's not the material, it's making sure the material doesn't leak out of the bag.
Yeah. there's an inner bag here that the sand goes into. Yeah, you don't want sand all over your place. But I guess the emphasis is really just look around. If you have a duffel bag, you can stuff it full of towels or gis or whatever else you have. And something like this, like Kevin said, like you can get creative with it. Don't be discouraged if you don't have equipment or you have limited equipment. If you can get a sandbag, you can start doing all sorts of stuff. You can do, I was watching some workouts online and it was people, they had a sandbag and they would do planks, right? They would do planks for like 20 seconds or whatever. They move forward and they'd like pull the sandbag and then plank. And then, you can plank for as long as you want and then pull it, and then here, pull it over, right? And you can do different things. You can pull it, do some push-ups, do some whatever else, like shoulder. Yeah, you just kind of have to get creative and, just make up your own. Think of it, I think of it like prison workouts. You're stuck, you have no equipment, or you have limited equipment. That's where you're going to have to use some creativity and adapt to the situation as opposed to sitting around and stewing in your own juices and, atrophying.
Yeah.
Like we're all, I think, prone to do at some point. So, I think that's a great drill. And really with, you're not going to do any arm locks on this thing, but like all the knee on belly you can do. If it's a little bit bigger, you can kind of do some knee cuts. Just moving, if I were here, I can, just that even as like a little prompt, I'm not really actually sliding on this at all, but that movement is just a good movement, right? That's just going to, keep your hips loose and, keep you from going crazy.
And my recommendation is there's, I think, a tendency, especially when like drilling alone, I think there's a tendency to kind of go easy and light, because you're not really in that same training environment. It's really difficult to get in that same mindset, but at least if you can, like once a day, try and get your heart rate up. If you're gonna take the time to like put together a sandbag and drill and like set aside time, like get your heart rate up, like sweat, work, like put in some effort, because it's not just to get better at jiu-jitsu, it's to go through that process of arduous training and to make yourself struggle a little bit in this like, this physical task. So there, you might want to go easy. and you might have to go easy the first couple of days, but this is going to be a couple of weeks where we're drilling alone, and I have a tendency to go crazy if I can't get a good sweat in, and so it's just going to be one of those things where we got to focus and put in good work when we do this. But it's worth it. It's worth it.
I'm tempted to go back, and when we first did these videos, we start off with like a warm-up, right? And I think at some point I got a bad rash and I couldn't do that anymore. I think that's why we stopped, or my hip gave up on my life. But I think there's something to be said for you pick certain exercises that you think are good exercises, and if you decide that they're worthwhile, you should do them every day. So there's very simple exercises like push-ups and sit-ups and air squats and these types of things that you could do every day. The question is just being motivated to just do 50 push-ups or 100 push-ups or whatever you can do in like a half hour. Maybe we should go back to those and just say like, all right, everybody, we're just going to do a workout a day, and just start shooting those videos, and you guys can come along with us and we'll see where we go. You're not going to be, what I promise you is that if you keep it within the realm of sanity and you don't try to do like 1,000 push-ups, unless Herschel Walker is watching, and I'm sure he doesn't do those anymore, but you know Herschel Walker, his whole thing was that he did like 10,000 push-ups and 10,000 sit-ups like every day.
That sounds more of like an exercise disorder.
Yeah, well, I mean, Herschel Walker was one of the best ever just to step on the field, but and that was his whole thing.
Oh, so he did other things besides.
He was a professional football player.
Oh, okay, that's good.
But in any event, it's sort of like if you can do whatever the range is that's comfortable for you. You know, if you could say like I'm going to spend a half hour, 20 minutes, or whatever it is, like you're saying, get your heart rate elevated. That can, as long as you don't stop. If you just did 3 or 4 sets of whatever it is, push-ups, sit-ups, air squats. You do 5 sets of 25, right, or 20, or whatever it is that you can do. At the end of 2 weeks, you will be stronger. You will be able to do a lot more push-ups, sit-ups, and squats, for sure.
I also really like using a sequence of push-ups, squats, sit-ups, and pull-ups as a way to kind of get into the mindset of training, right? Like if every time before you train, you do 3 sets of 10 squats, 10 push-ups, 10 pull-ups, 10 push-ups.
Whatever.
The 4 things.
Super
and then, like, as you do them, your brain is like kind of kicking into gear. It's realizing like it's time to get into training, it's time to do stuff, and it's a nice transitionary period that I know like a lot of schools use warm-ups in that same effect. But yeah, I think warm-ups are super valuable in that way, and just like it does force you to put in those numbers, like people have a tendency to want to skip because it's like, it's just like 10 push-ups, 30 push-ups, I can do it tomorrow.
Yep, or I'll do it later.
I'll do it later.
Yeah. I do that. I'm totally guilty of all of that, right? Like, I worked out hard yesterday, I'm tired, my elbow hurts, I'll do it later after dinner, when I get home. Tomorrow morning, and then it's just you kind of delay, and then 2 days go by, 3 days, and then 3 days go by, and then you're
and it's like, I need to do like 900 push-ups now to catch up.
And you never do it. And then you're like, screw it, I'm never going to do what I wanted to do. I failed.
I'll just be out of shape. It's fine.
It's fine. Just pass the Ben & Jerry's and I'll drown my sorrow in cookies and cream.
Because it's like sometimes when things are easy, you put them off. And like push-ups, sit-ups they're easy enough to where like, you don't feel like you'll really get anything out of them unless you put them in a spot where they're like supremely useful. And that's where like, having them as warm-ups is really, really nice. So more pull-ups, more push-ups, more sit-ups.
Pull-ups are a tall order.
Couple weeks.
Pull-ups are a tall order.
I've finally started doing them correctly, and I'm trying to get like my arms pushed forward and get more of my like upper chest and back engaged with it. And then the gym shut down. Now I'm mad. I can't work on it.
I mean, we've got pull-up bars over there.
I'm not strong enough to do it without assistance yet, though. So I should get a band. Do we have bands?
I think we do have bands, but I'm not sure if they're strong enough to help you or big enough. I think the ones that they use for pull-ups are long. I think the ones that I have are not those types.
Stand in them and it helps you.
Yeah.
It's fun.
All right.
Yep.
So maybe tomorrow. What's today? Tuesday. We'll put it off one day, and then. But I mean, people should have a reason to tune in. If nothing else, we'll guilt them.
Yeah. Watch us work out.
I mean, the idea should be that people that people should feel like it's a kind of an appointment, that they can keep, and whether or not they do it with us or they do it, later, But the other way to do this is kind of like is doing a diary. I found when I want to lose weight, if I do a food diary and I keep track and I hold myself accountable, that actually works. But you have to do the diary, right? So you have to, every day, you have to have some sort of written record of what you did. And then it almost doesn't matter if you meet your goal every day. At some point, because you're holding you're documenting it motivationally, at least for me, I just say like, okay, I was over yesterday, I have to be below today. And then just that discipline and just seeing where you are, like in terms of like what you ate, how many calories, or how much you worked out, you see it, it's concrete. And so I get competitive with myself, you know, of like, okay, now I have to really, you know, hit this goal. And then you start seeing the results, and then that kind of gets into a good positive kind of feedback back loop where you say, I'm gonna work out even more, and then your numbers go up and or down, wherever you want them to go, and it's all good. So we're gonna take that, we're gonna do jiu-jitsu diaries. I want everybody,
I just got a journal.
we need to have a journal, and we're gonna do it every day and keep it tracked. And it's gonna be super simple. It's not gonna be hard, right? It's not, I don't wanna make this like a grueling workout, at least in the beginning. I think it's ideal just to get people to start the ball rolling, and then you take it from that on forwards. So maybe we're gonna have that's my proposal.
Okay, I'm down.
We just do push-ups, sit-ups, squats, maybe a bunch of these things.
I'm still probably gonna try and lift in the morning though. Pete said I could use his barbell.
Well, do your thing.
It'll be great. But I'm gonna come in and we'll do some
I'll make you do extra push-ups just because you're already warmed up
Try and
from
get
bench presses.
calories up tonight.
All right, guys.
Milkshakes for dinner.
All right, tomorrow, get ready to do some push-ups.
Why?
All right, bye guys.